Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhedu Vibhagine Vyomavatyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Gukarastu Andakaro Vai Rukarastu Nivartakaha Andakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Bhadram Karnebhihi Shrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyema Akshabhiryajatraha Stirairangaiyastushtvagum Sastanubhihi Vyashema Devahitan Yadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vriddhashravaha Swasti nah Pusha Vishwavedaha Swasti nastarksho Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspatir Dadhatu Om Shanti 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 Om Athashvalayano Bhagavantam Parameshtinam Upasasametya Uvacha Adhihi Bhagavo Brahma Vidyam Varishtam Sada Satpihi Sevyamananam Nigudham Yaya Chirat Sarva Papam Vyapohya Parat Param Purusham Yati Vidwan. Number 2. Tasmai Saho Vacha Pitamahascha Shraddha Bhakti Dhyana Yogat Avehi. So once the student approaches Brahmaji, the very father of the whole creation, and asks, please tell me, please teach me Brahma Vidya, then the teacher starts with saying that Pitamahascha Tasmai Uvacha Shraddha Bhakti Dhyana Yogat Avehi. May you resort to Shraddha and Bhakti and Dhyana Yoga. 3 things he mentioned. So they're all successive. First Shraddha, then Bhakti and Dhyana Yoga. So we have gone through the significance of Shraddha, and we are now currently looking at the significance of Bhakti. What does Bhakti really mean in the sense of Vedanta? Is this an independent way of solving? Is it necessary? What is devotion and bhakti, and where is the role of that in making progress? So here one important thing to see: the premise of Vedanta, the premise of the scriptural study of spirituality, if you want to say, what do you mean by spirituality? What do you mean by he or she is a very spiritual person? So when we ask that question, what does it really mean? It's just a word. So normally we would think he's a good person. He's got good values and all that is good, but it's much more than that. The spirituality means pardon me. Really speaking, what spirituality means is this. And we went over this a little bit in the first class this morning on Brahma Sutra as well. I think it's really a good way to look at it, I feel. And that is that when we have problems in our lives, physical problems mostly, sometimes mental problems, but physical problems, there are two ways of approaching that. One is symptomatic relief, and the other one is enquiry into the fundamental disease that causes the symptoms. I think it's a good way to delineate two fundamentally different ways of approaching the solution to a problem. And viewed from that perspective, from that viewpoint, spirituality means adherence to solving the disease, not the symptomatic relief. I think this is really the way we should look at it. This is what spirituality is. A very strange way of looking at spirituality, a spiritual person. Really, the spiritual person is the one who is dedicated to finding the very roots of the issues and seeing if that can be uprooted. Because until that's uprooted, it's kind of like you have all these weeds in your garden where you keep cutting them, but the roots below the ground that are not seen by you keep regenerating the weeds on top of the ground, and you continuously have weeds that you're dealing with. So this is really the premise and the promise of Vedanta, of scriptural study, of spirituality. So Vedanta deals with an inquiry into the fundamental issues of the problems of life. And so here it says that the fundamental issue is that you have an ignorance about what your nature is, and everything else is a symptom of that inquiry into the nature of the self. So the problem is here, that if you want to just summarize the disease, the summary of the disease is that you have an ignorance about the nature of yourself. This is the disease. And if you can look into what do you mean by an ignorance of the self, that enquiry is the treatment of the disease. In the end, it all becomes non-issue if the problem is solved. If the ignorance is solved, if the ignorance is taken care into account, everything falls into place. This is the premise and therefore the promise of the Vedas, of Vedanta. And another aspect of this is that, so I'm trying to come up with a description of bhakti. That's the section we are on, is the bhakti. So he said, Shraddha Bhakti and Dhyana Yogat Avehi. This is what Brahmaji has been saying. So now we're looking at the bhakti. and just expanding that to understand exactly what bhakti is. So another aspect of this solution is that it doesn't mean that you don't do symptomatic relief. It doesn't mean like if you have some kind of an issue and you go to the local pharmacist and then a person will say, don't go to the pharmacist because this is something much more serious and you have to look into the causes of the thing. Don't go to the pharmacist. Nobody will tell you that. What the wise person will say is, please go to the pharmacist and get some immediate relief to the pain caused by this problem. But please understand, it is likely that it won't solve the fundamental problem. You can keep putting some ointment on the skin and get some rash that you have taken care of. And so, but really speaking, you have to look at to see what is causing the rash, and for that you have to make an appointment and you have to go to a knowledgeable doctor who's a specialist in skin care, and hopefully they can do some tests and see what the issue is. And that's going to take a while, but in the meantime you can continue looking at the symptomatic aspects of it. It's okay. Nobody will say don't go to the pharmacist. So here, even in the treatment of the disease, it may be that the relief will come slowly. It may not happen right away, because I think our expectation is that once the knowledge is received, then I should be okay. And this is really what we are studying. If you look at the essence of all of the classes and so on, it is to say that once you are told that you are okay, and it is told by Shruti, which is very reliable and so on, then how come I don't feel okay? This is the question that we have. This is what we've been tackling on the Brahma Sutra class also, and also the Kena Upanishad class on Tuesday night and so on. A very fundamental issue, or we face all of that. That if you say this is the case, then it should happen, but it is not happening. So there, Vedanta says, listen, there is a difference between knowledge and an absorption of that knowledge to yourself. The absorption takes a while. And so we will study all of this in more detail. But in some ways, I would say that this is an interesting thing to see. If you are hungry, very, very hungry, you really would love to get some food. When you start eating, your hunger is satisfied by the amount of food that you start eating. So it's not as though you finished the whole food and then your hunger will go away. Your hunger will slowly get less and less as you eat more. So here there is a famous popular Vedantic Nyaya. Nyaya means, Nyaya is a technical term. Nyaya means the logic as enunciated by this example. This is what called Nyaya. So this is called Saptavada Nyaya. Saptavada Nyaya. So it means the seventh Vada. So Vada means the one that you go to many of the South Indian restaurants and they will have idli and vada. So vada is a kind of like a donut which is salty and it's deep fried. It's made out of some. It's made of some lentils, white lentils paste, and then they make a donut out of it and they deep fry it, and you can eat it with a chutney. This is called vada. It's quite substantive. It's about this big. You probably are. I mean, I'm talking to non-Indians, but Indians all know this. So this is called vada. So this nyaya is called sapta vada. Sapta means 7. So here's the story. The story is that there are 2 friends that went to a restaurant, and so one of the person went to when the attendant came, and he says, "I'm very hungry. What do you have that I can have to quench my to satisfy my hunger?" So he says, "Sir, you can have dosas, you can do this and so on." But he says, "I'm something want very quick. I'm very hungry." So he says, "We do have vadas if you want." So he says, "How much does the vada cost?" So he says, 1 rupee each. Let's say $1 each. So will that satisfy my hunger? So the person said, "It should, yeah." So he says, "Okay, give me a vada." So 1 vada comes, and he's still hungry. So he says, "Give me another vada." After the second vada, he's still hungry. His friend also ordered a vada, but he did not order any more after the first one. So he just ate 1 vada and he says, "Okay, that I'm done. I may have some other things, but as far as vada goes, This person was hungry after the first one, still hungry after the second. He had 7 vadas. After the 7th one, he says, "I am satisfied. I'm not hungry anymore. I have a glass of water. I'm ready to go." So he asks for a bill. And the person comes in and gives him a bill for $7, for $1 for each vada. He says, "What is this? I'm not going to pay you $7. I'm going to pay you $1. He says, "Sir, what do you mean by $1? You had 7 vadas." He says, "But only the 7th vada was the one that satisfied my hunger. The first one didn't do it. The second one didn't do it. So I'm not going to pay for it. You told me that the vada should satisfy my hunger. And it didn't. Only the 7th one did. I'm not going to pay for you." This is foolish. So this is what happens in Vedanta study. We slowly are gaining some ideas. So this is not symptomatic relief. It is disease hunting. I have a problem with various things coming into my life. Some are more important than others, but all collectively make me very uncomfortable. I'm not completely satisfied with myself. And so I'm looking for relief in some ways. And when I study, I'm told that this is not something that you can solve overnight. But it can be satisfied if you have accumulated enough evidence to answer the doubts of your mind. This is a very important thing to see. I mean, I'm repeating myself. It's not something that we haven't talked about this, but in the context of the bhakti, this should be reiterated and understood, which is that even though jnanam, even though knowledge of the self should be able to solve my problems of life, but until I become clear about it, it will not do so. Now, what will happen is that think about it, your clarity, your understanding, your absorption is going to come in stages. The knowledge may come suddenly, but the absorption of that comes in stages. What does that mean? That means that, really speaking, even the fundamental aspects of who we are, Atma, Anatma, Viveka, Vairagya, all that can be given in the basic books of Tattva Bodha. If not very clear about Tattva Bodha, you can do some secondary books. You can do Vedanta Sara. You can take Drikdrishya Viveka. And so the fundamentals about what is Atma that doesn't change, what is Anatma that is completely changing, is all presented to you. All presented to you. But here's the thing. You still have a lot of doubts about exactly how that works, how that affects you. And so the doubts have to be clarified. But it doesn't mean that all of a sudden that nothing will happen to you until all the doubts are cleared. As your doubts are cleared, your hunger for relief becomes less and less. Very much like eating 7 vadas. If you eat 1 vada, you'll be 1/7 less hungry. Second vada, 2/10 of vadas. So the fulfillment will come, but you cannot say that the rest of it was useless. No. So the clarity of doubts is really the fundamental. That should be understood to be the fundamental job that we have to do, is to work on our own doubts. Is that really? Because to transform from a sense of limitation to a sense of non-limitation is not an easy thing to do. I mean, it's easy, but if I am prepared. If I'm not prepared, then it looks impossible. People will laugh at you. What are you talking about? How can you do that? Life has its own limitations. You cannot cross it on all of a sudden. So it's an enormous task. But I need to really be very dedicated in preserving the search. This is what bhakti is. The bhakti can be summarized in these terms, as we've been discussing, as not losing sight of the fact that I am solving a disease, even though the symptoms keep coming back. And as the symptoms come back, if I understand why they are coming back, to that extent they don't fundamentally bother me. I think I told you this real life story, that one time, this is like, now time is passing, so what I used to say was 10 years ago, now 15, and it's probably 20 years ago. Yeah, it's probably close to 20 years ago. I developed a skin rash which was quite significant all over the body and just would not be solved by having topical creams and stuff like this. I was in bad shape. It crossed from a point of being a nuisance to becoming a huge problem. I was unable to get the relief on it. I had gone to the dermatologist and went through all kinds of stuff and so on. And then my Bhagwan finally, after making me suffer for a while, decided I think I better give relief to the person. This is how these things happen, honestly. The presence of Ishvara's blessings just comes in small packages, but very definite packages. You are not even aware of that. I still remember in the other room I was sitting there, and one of my wife's cousins and his wife were visiting from India. And they were staying with Pammi's brother, my wife's brother. And we had them over for dinner one time. And she saw my skin had rashes all over. And she said, what are you doing about these rashes? So I said, I don't know. I'm not getting any relief. If I put some ointment, this goes away. But then it comes back here. She says, my husband had the same thing. And we found a doctor that completely relieved him from the symptoms. I said, really? How did that happen? She says, this is an Ayurvedic doctor in New Delhi. She is from New Delhi. And he really completely, I said, wow, that's wonderful. And she was leaving for New Delhi the next day. So I said, I'm not going to go back. My mother was still there at that time. And I would go there quite often, once or twice a year. But I said, right now I don't have any plans to do so. So she says, do this. Write your symptoms out on a piece of paper and give it to me. I'll give it to Dr. Bhatt. His name is Dr. Bhatt. And then you can call him to discuss it after a week or so. Give him some time to read all this. I said, that sounds like a good idea. So that evening itself, I wrote down a very complete chronology of what has happened and gave it to this lady. And she took it with her to New Delhi. Maybe in an email. I've been 20 years, maybe it was not an email. I don't remember. And a week later, I talked to Dr. Bhatt. And I think I was telling this to students earlier. I had a very interesting conversation with him. So he said, Mr. Kapoor, I have a couple of important things to tell you. One is that this is a piece of cake for me. I know exactly what you have, the way you've described it, and I am telling you, I will get it done. I think half of my disease already got solved whenever you go to a doctor, and the doctor actually gives you that confidence. That is an amazing thing. Number one. Second thing he said is, this will take a while, as much as several months. And I hope you're prepared for that. But this is like Saptavada Nyaya. And of course I said, I've been suffering for like years. So what, another 6 months? I said, no problems. And really speaking, and so then it was a matter of getting all these Ayurvedic medicines, and there were quite a few of them. And there was also guidance on changing your diet, don't eat this, don't eat that, etc., eat less chili, and all of that. It was like pitta. I was a pitta causing dosha in Ayurveda. And so he said, it will get that done. You just do these things. 1 month had gone by, nothing happened. No changes. But do you know what? I never lost any faith in it. So I continued to eat those medicines, have those medicines, change my diet. 6 weeks later, it was about 15-20% better. And I said, wow, this is wonderful. 2 or 3 months later, it was 50% better. Within 4 months, it was all gone. I still have the tendency, and I still get the medicines from India for doing that. But it has been an amazing thing. So it is that, and the Vedanta does the same thing. It says, really, I know exactly what you're going through. But please be patient, because the absorption of this knowledge might take a little while. And during this time, don't lose heart. Don't just say nothing is happening and maybe I should do something else, and some other people start reading different. And I see this happening. People are there were some students who came to some classes early on, and they stopped coming. And I sometimes ask them, I says, where are you? How are you doing? I don't tell them, why did you stop coming or anything like this. But I ask them, how's life? How are things going? And they'll say, I've read some books and I'm very impressed by, this is happening as a real case. One of the students actually has been telling me recently that I've really found this book. And I said, and those people that they referred to, I don't have much confidence in them, because it's fundamentally different from Vedanta. That means that it is not Vedanta. That means that there is only one way to look at it, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so what is meant by bhakti is that you need to have dedication towards the results, even though you don't have the results yet. So this is a second stage from Shraddha. See that? This is important. All these are important things that I've pointed out. That Shraddha means that first you will not have the Shraddha until you have some trust in the authenticity of the knowledge. Number one. Number two, do not become impatient too soon. Keep your impatience, let it happen. I'm not saying don't do this. There's no do's and don'ts. Just an advice that please see that the results are going to take a little longer time. So this is the meaning of the word bhakti. So bhakti doesn't mean that you just put your palms down and all you can do, no doubt about it. But it is an internal strength based on a resolution that I am doing the right thing, and it will take its time. It will happen. So there, a very important thing to see in part of this, and this is where we had already started to talk about it in the last class, and let me now kind of repeat it to re-emphasize that, which is this. You can deal with the issues of your life as symptoms. By all means do it. All means do it. Don't say, I will never say that don't deal with the problems of life as you are used to doing today. So continue doing that. We're not saying stop it or anything like that. But see them as a symptom relief, not a disease relief. And keep your focus on learning the disease. And the disease, the fundamental disease is ignorance of the self. So this Swami Viditatmananda has emphasized very well in this text, as you may have seen, and I would reiterate it for you, that really speaking, you should not rest with the blame on anything. If there is a blame which is not understanding the reality of who you are, it's all because of the misplaced identification with your body-mind appliance. And if the appliance is giving you problem, then you should understand you are the electricity independent of the appliance. This is what needs to be done. And while you are doing it, because you have doubts, is it really, am I really this is exactly what it's all about. Am I really the electricity which is independent of all appliances? Am I really that? This is the doubt. Because your whole life is that of acting as an appliance. Because the appliance has both. So it has the inert aspect of it and the alive aspect to it, which is electricity. Alive means not even prana, but self-effulgence. So it has effulgence and it also has inertness. It's a mixture of those two. And all my life I am really so used to acting out as the mixture of the two, that to separate them and to continue to see them as fundamentally unmixable it takes a while. This is where the doubts come in. So the advice, so to summarize that, the bhakti means a commitment to never forget that all your problems are due to self-ignorance. I think this is a good way to summarize. It doesn't mean that you don't deal with the topical issues and deal with them. Absolutely. But all the time thinking that, all the time cognizant of the fact that this is just symptomatic relief. Until I grow up to become mature enough to understand that I am independent, then your problems are not going to be completely going away. But they will. They will one day. So this is the premise and the promise of the scriptural studies. And so in some ways, Swami Viditatmananda, I think, pointed this very well, that many of the issues that come up are really a hint for me to inquire on the fundamental disease. In other words, if there are some problems that crop up, don't react against the problem and say, just go away, I don't want this kind of a thing. Let it happen. And let that act as a trigger for self-inquiry. You know, this is really a fact that people who have more problems than others, there is somebody in the back saying, stop it. Stop hankering for things. Just stay with yourself. This is how Ishvara reaches out to us. This is exactly how. But we miss the symptoms. We miss the presence of that. There's a story in Mahabharata, where the mother of the Pandavas, Kunti, she was telling Sri Krishna, who she knew was the avatar of Vishnu. She said, "Oh Krishna, please do not cease giving me problems in my life." So people will say, "What? She wants more problems? Why? This is very strange." She had the wisdom to see that, to say and to see that problems, if there are problems without a possibility of a relief, then it is okay not to wish for problems. You see? But if there is a alternative which is much better, and yet you have problems, you want the problems to remind you that this is not the way to go. So Kunti said that to Sri Krishna. She says, "Oh Lord, please, can I have one prayer? Keep giving me problems so I don't forget you." That's a lot to say, but there's something to be learned from it. That any time there is an opportunity, any time you have an issue, let that become a trigger for you to become much more inward focused. So this is the meaning of the word bhakti. Means never losing sight of the fundamental research on who I am, what is my history, what is my future. And the same amount of energy that I have in devoting to the world, if I redirect it to finding the truth, this is what called finding God, really speaking, then I am sure to become successful. So with that, we can now close off the discussion on the second aspect of this, which is bhakti. We did Shraddha, we did bhakti. Now let us go to the third one that Brahmaji talked about, which is Dhyanam, which is meditation. So on this book, it is given on page number 67, as you know. So here, as Swami Viditatmananda says, Dhyanam, can be called meditation, or Dhyana can be the focus of the mind on what is to be done. So when Shraddha and Bhakti are there, then my mind is available without any resistance. It is willingly available for listening to the teacher. Okay, so let's look into Dhyanam and what is the significance of it and what does it really mean. So again, a little bit of a summary, and I think perhaps we had talked in the first class also, in other classes, that there are 3 stages, if you may, 3 stages to complete this job of understanding completely about what my nature is. To complete that understanding, it has 3 stages. So we've talked about this many times. It's called the initial introduction to the subject matter. Then, this is what you call Shravanam. Then I need to really test it against my experiences. So this is what is will be called Mananam, or another good word for that is Vichara. Beautiful word, Vichara. So Vichara means deliberating. That would be a good translation of English translation of the word Vichara. And so Vichara doesn't mean just pure thinking, but really deliberating on it, absorbing it, removing doubts about it. And the third stage of that is Nidhidhihasanam, where I develop the capacity to dwell on the fundamental truth about myself uninterrupted by other things. And you know that we can look at it in a couple of different ways. So suppose you have you're acting in a play, and because of whatever reason you have forgotten who you really are, and you are caught up in the role play of the play, the script of the play, which may not be pleasant, which may have some rough moments as the script shows. There may be some physical violence. Somebody may slap you or kick you or whatever. This is part of the play. And now, for example, for some reason, you have forgotten who you really are. And you take the role so seriously that you have changed. It doesn't normally should not happen, except for if you've had some drugs or some alcohol, in which case your self-identity has been forgotten and you have taken on this new identity of a role player in the middle of this play. And you are now acting strangely. And you don't like it. You don't like it. You haven't understood exactly what the change is between you as an actor and you as a role player. Okay? So we're talking about Dhyanam. I'm taking about that. So Dhyana means that supposing you're acting in a weird way, saying that you are really upset by the role, and somebody says, I think that person maybe had too much alcohol or something, because he's forgetting that he's not the role. And so you said, why are you getting so upset? This is just a role for you. Remember this is a funny story which reminds me, I think I've told you that before, which impinges on this aspect of the actor and the role. So there was an actor who was having some difficulty in finding jobs, but he applied for a role of a cop who is in a car chasing a robber. So he was quite well equipped bodily and tall and strong. So they said, we have this role, would you like to take this? And he says, what is it? He says, you have to be a cop and you have to drive cars very fast. So he says, can you do that? And he says, oh yeah. I drive very well. So he says, okay, here's the role. You have to chase this robber at extremely high speeds in the middle of traffic, going back and forth and so on. And the speeds may touch up to 100 miles per hour. Can you handle it? He says, oh, no problem. I actually drive pretty fast and this is no big deal for me. So he says, okay, here's the script. So this robber, somebody calls you and he said there's been some robbery and this guy is speeding away. You have to pick up the chase and you have to now chase him. And you have to go back and forth between lanes. And here's the end. At the end of that, the guy eludes you and you're not able to catch up with him. That's all you need to do. Because he's too fast for you. You cannot really catch up to him. And then you just, but this whole sequence will take you several minutes. And this is the role that you have to play. Are you okay with it? He says, yeah, absolutely. So they start shooting. And it all starts very well. They start to speed up and so on. Then in the middle of this fellow says, the script says you have to do this over about 50 miles. And so, we can take, it's going to take 10 minutes or so, and maybe not 50, maybe less than that, 25 miles. It's going to take about 10 minutes of the shooting. So the guy says, the script says that I don't catch up with him. And quite frankly, this is pretty dangerous because this is a real traffic. I have to go back and forth between homes. Why am I risking my life? I only get about $1,000 for this role or something like that. And the script says anyway that I lose him. So after a couple of miles, the fellow slows down. So there is a cameraman who is supposed to do all this. He says, hey, this guy was supposed to keep chasing at 100 miles per hour. He slowed down to 60 miles and he's just coasting and he's already lost him even within 5 miles. What happened? He says, really? Okay, so after the whole sequence is over, he went to him and he says, hey, what happened here? He says, I figured that the script calls for my losing him anyway. So what difference does it make? I just gave up a little bit sooner than you expected me to. It's okay. It's no big. He says, no, you've completely spoiled the whole thing because you're mixed up who you really are with what you were supposed to do. And this is our problem in life. As we start to study Vedanta, we mix up those two things together. And so the advice is Dhyanam. Dhyanam means that when you are mixing up between your role play and who you really are, you should now you have a very clear idea about the role and who you are. There's no confusion about that. What is a role and what you have no confusion. So that means Shravanam has been done. And even perhaps Mananam has been done to a good degree. Your deliberations have also been done. All of that has been done. And yet, because of some obstruction in the way you think, you're continue to mixing it up together. And what you need to do, so examples, forget about this example of the racing cop. If you are acting in a play where the play's script calls for some rough handling, you may get slapped or something like this, and you're not we can construct another one. So there is a there is a script where you are a woman and you are playing a role of a battered wife, and your husband is really slapping you around and so on and so forth, and it hurts. Really speaking, he's supposed to not hurt you very much, but it can happen. And so you've been playing this for a while, and one day you had a couple of extra drinks. You shouldn't have had that much, but you did. And you got dressed up and as a battered wife, and you got so upset about being hit by this guy in the play that you hit him back. And you're not supposed to do that. If you have a battered wife, then you just take all the abuse and cry and all of that. You have to do all of that. Instead, on this day, you start to fight back and slap your husband. And the whole play just goes awry. And they'll say, cut, cut, cut. What are you doing? You're not supposed to. He says, he hit me so hard. He says, but that was just a play. It will be okay. And he says, no, I don't want anybody to be hitting me. I don't do that. What is wrong with you? What did you do? She says, well, I had a couple of extra drinks. That is your problem. Can you please do this? Go over there, sit down, and wait for the effect of the booze to go away. Drink some coffee. And ruminate on who you really are. You are a well-known actress. You makes a lot of money. And you just messed up a role. And so this is the role of meditation and dhyana. So the role of meditation is not to give you new information. That all comes from Shravanam and Mananam. It really comes from Shravanam. What it does is to put into practice through your own thinking the distinguishing between yourself and the role that you are playing. Is what you have to do. So in summary, what meditation, and this fact is being discussed in a lot of technical ways in the Brahma Sutras. In the next couple of classes, we are going to go over this in a very structured, technical way. I'm just giving you a summary of this because of the nature of this class. So what it means is that if something is not working, it is supposed to work, but it is not yet working. It could be because of certain obstructions to the truth. The truth is there, but obstructed. So, something like cataract. In fact, cataract is given as a good example in Vedanta. So, in cataract, your eyes are fundamentally healthy. There's nothing wrong with them. But there is a covering that is preventing you from seeing clearly. So, the removal of the cataract does not change your eye, but it removes the obstruction. So both Mananam and Nidhidhihasanam are like covering of your eye. So the eye is healthy, which is given in Shravanam. So Shravanam says you are okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not limited. You're independent. And this I didn't know this before. But that's what the teaching provides us. But the teaching is ineffective. You see, it is still ineffective until the covering is removed. So it's very much like, supposing you have problems in vision, and you go to ophthalmologist, and the ophthalmologist looks at it and says, I have some really good news for you. Your eyes are very healthy. There's nothing wrong with it. So really, but then how come I don't still not see very clearly? Because you have some cataract. Oh, I have cataract? What does that mean? And how is that to be removed? Well, the cataract is not a very serious problem. It can be easily removed. Until you make an appointment, you will continue to have poor vision. But once it is done, which is a simple procedure, you're going to be okay. So this is the role of the meditation. Swami Paramarthananda has said that there are like two layers. One layer is Mananam and the second layer is Nidhidhihasanam. And what the Nidhidhihasanam does is systematically remove the layer. And so going back to the example of this lady who was inebriated and therefore was asked to just calm down. The effect of the alcohol is going to take a while. It's not like just like this. You have to sit there and so on, but just think about who you really are. You're not the role. You have been playing the role of a battered wife for so many days, and you've done extremely well, and we pay you very well, by the way. Let me remind you, you're one of the top people. But don't get confused with who you really are. And when you have sobered up, please come back and we'll resume the shooting. This is the role of Dhyanam, meditation, Nidhidhihasanam, pretty much the same thing. So, so in that sense, Brahmaji tells the student that may you invoke these three things, Shraddha, Bhakti and Dhyana Yoga, for going forward. It's not, it hasn't been communicated. All that will come later on as to what the issues are. But this is preparation, the ability to be prepared to understand this. Okay? So with that, the second verse is now over. And we can go to the third verse. So this one is a verse that may be fairly familiar to you. And is actually chanted whenever we have a sannyasi entering a place for some purpose, like giving a talk or just gracing a certain occasion. So as you know, this is what we chant. So let me just chant the same way as we do, and then we will understand what the meanings of it is. So the way the Veda is chanted is Na karmana na prajaya dhane na tyage naike amritatvamanshuhu parena nakan nihitan guhayam vibhrajate yat yatayo vishanti. And then after that, then it continues on. Vedant, number 4. Vedanta Vijnana Sunishchitartha Sannyasa Yogat Yataya Shuddha Sattva Aha Te Brahma Lokeshu Tapara Ye Te Brahma Lokeshu Parantakale Paramritat Parimuchanti Sarve. And then it goes on to some other things. But these 2 verses are chanted together as part of welcoming a sannyasi when he or she enters a place where either a talk is to be given or just as a presence in the beginning of some ritual that has to be done. So we are familiar. I think many of you are familiar with that. Na karmana na prajaya dhanena. So na also is to be used na dhanena. So for the sake of meter, the na means not is removed, but it should be na karmana na prajaya na dhanena. Tyagena eke amritatvam anashuhu parena nakam nihitam guhayam vibhrajate yat yatayaha vishanti. Okay, so let's look at the word meaning of that. Na karmana, not by work, not by doing anything. Na prajaya, not by progeny. We'll go into the meaning of all that in a minute. Na dhanena, not nor by wealth. Instead, tyagena eke, only by renunciation. Amritatvam, immortality. Anashuhu is attained. And that amritatvam which has been attained is higher than heaven. Parena nakam. Nihitam guhayam. Nihitam means placed, situated. Guhayam. Guha means a cave. A cave which is the nature of a cave being that it is dark inside. There is no natural source of light unless it is lighted. The cave can be lighted, but otherwise, if it is not externally lighted, then the sunlight does not cross the inside of the cave. It is naturally dark. So it is guhayam, in the cave of the heart. So we will study all of that. What does it mean? In the cave of the heart, vibhrajate, which shines. And what is this referring to? What is the key word here? Amritatvam. Immortality. Immortality is in the heart of the human being. We'll study all of that. It may not be very clear at the moment. Yet, which yatayaha, the sannyasis, the renunciates, vishanti, who enter. Okay, so these are the word meanings. Now if we put them together in a sentence, not by deeds, nor by progeny, nor by wealth, but by renunciation alone have some people attained immortality. The renunciates attain that which is higher than the heaven and which shines in the cave of the heart of the intellect. So this is the sentence. Right? Okay. So I'm wondering whether we should start on it, because this is quite a big topic. So I think I won't spend much time further because of lack of time, but I would say a couple of things. So let's look at the verb yatayaha, yatayo. Yatayaha means that people who are sannyasis, who are renunciates, are called yatayaha, yati. We say yati muni. Yati muni. Rishi, there are three words that are typically grouped together. Rishi, Muni, and Yati. So just look at those three words for now. Maybe that's all that I would do, and then, for now. The word Rishi means one that knows. So not anyone who knows, but the one who knows the self, the Paramatma, the Jivatma, the very self, is called Rishi. So as you know, the name that we have for our institution here is Arsha Vidya Center. And so this is a takeoff on Swami Dayananji's Arsha Vidya Gurukulam, AVG, or Arsha Vidya Peetham. Peetham means the very fundamental building block is called Peetham. So Arsha Vidya. The word Arsha is the sixth case of Rishi, of the Rishi. The knowledge of the Rishi is called Arsha Vidya. Rishehe idam iti arsham. That the knowledge of the Rishi, which is Brahma Vidya, where it is taught is called the Center for the Knowledge of the Rishi. That's the name that we have given to our institution. Arsha Vidya Center, ABC. So the Rishi is the one that knows. And the second word is Muni. The Muni means the one who may not yet be a Rishi, but is of the nature of enquiring into the truth which will turn that person into a Rishi. This is what is called Mananashila Yasya. One whose nature is to enquire and to deliberate. Think about it. It's called Muni. Then the last word is Yatihi, which is what is given here. So Yati here means Yatnashila, one whose nature is to be committed to go on with Shraddha and Bhakti is called Yatihi. Yatnashila. So much so that the normal interests of one towards the life doesn't attract that person anymore. It is really a renunciate. This is what does the renunciate mean. So the renunciate doesn't mean that you don't want money and you don't want this. That's not the meaning of it. But he or she has renounced the commitment to pursue, in our background today, to pursue symptomatic relief. And if it happens, it happens. But really, I want to cure the disease, to go to the fundamental aspect of it. That is part called yati, yatnashila. Yatna here means effort also. One who does not give up the effort. So all of these are a good derivative of Shraddha Bhakti and Dhyana Yoga. And so this is a natural derivative of that, which is the next verse. So with that, we will leave the principal explanation of this verse to next class. Okay, so with that, I close the class today. Om Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. So Virendra's question, is there a difference in between Dhyana, Upasana and Nidhidhihasanam? So Upasana is quite different from Dhyana and Nidhidhihasana. Upasana means a prayer, a prayerful attitude. And as prayer means prayer which is based on understanding. So a devotion based on understanding is called Upasana. So a dedication to know the truth about the nature of God, the world, and so on, and to be naturally attracted towards that because one has become knowledgeable enough to inquire into it, is all Upasana. Then Dhyana and Nidhidhihasana are similar but somewhat different. It depends on how people use those. So generally Dhyana means the ability to think about a subject matter uninterrupted by other thoughts, and so focused. So for example, and this is nothing extraordinary. In fact, you find dhyanam being employed even by children who are studying a young person, 7 or 8 or 9 year old. When they're reading a book, they are so absorbed in reading the book that if their mom calls and says, hey, dinner is ready, and then the person doesn't respond because they are so absorbed, or watching a movie or something like this. So this is called dhyanam, where you have a single focused attention to a subject matter. Nidhidhihasanam is a more evolved form of dhyanam, where you are actually looking at what has been learnt in the Shravanam and Mananam, and now in a very deliberate manner you bring it up for your focus. It is still a focus which is uninterrupted, but it's a richer focus on a group of subjects that all hang together, which you have learned before. So that would be called a Nidhidhihasana. So that would be the difference between them. All right. Good, very good. Thanks for attending this class. And if there's no more question, then I will just close the class and hopefully we'll see you next week. Hari Om.